In the dusty heartland, a desperate farmer woman cried out for hope in a damaged church. Her prayer echoed beyond the remote plains, touching the heart of the Vatican. Pope Francis, moved by her faith, appears unexpectedly in the forgotten community, transforming despair into a miracle. A story of unwavering faith, divine coincidence, and spiritual renewal that will move you. Subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching this journey of hope and unexpected blessings. The red dust of the road danced under the last rays of sun when Connie emerged from her small patch of land with calloused hands and a face marked by premature wrinkles. At 35, her body already carried the weight of a lifetime of struggle against the arid land of Hope Creek, a village lost in the confines of the dusty heartland where even God seemed to have forgotten the way. The relentless drought, which had already stretched for 2 consecutive summers, turned every drop of water into a treasure more valuable than gold. Connie adjusted the old faded scarf over her dark hair and looked towards the horizon, where the sky and earth merged into a reddish line. How could she maintain faith when nature itself seemed to have turned its back on its children? How could she keep believing when prayers seemed to get lost in the hot, dry air before even reaching the heavens? The clouds promise, but they don't deliver, she murmured to herself, repeating the saying she had heard so many times from her late mother. She stored the hoe in the small wooden shed, eaten away by time, and walked towards the adobe and thatch house she had inherited from her husband, taken 5 years earlier by a fever that the doctor from the big city, 6 hours away by dirt road, couldn't identify. The church bell resonated in the distance, its metallic sound traveling through the dusty paths of the village. It was Sunday, the day for Mass celebrated by Father Joachim, an old man with white hair and legs already shaky from the weight of his 78 years. Connie quickened her pace, not out of blind devotion, but because that was the only moment of the week when the entire community gathered. And there, between Hail Marys and Our Fathers, the small hopes that kept the heart of that place alive were born. "Mom, you're going to be late again," yelled Tim from the doorstep. The teenage son who didn't carry her blood but whom she loved as if he had sprung from her own being. He had his father's lively, clever eyes, but he had inherited from her the stubbornness that didn't know the word quit. "I'm coming, son. I just need to wash my hands and face with the little water we have left." The whole village was already gathered in the small adobe church when Connie and Tim arrived. The white walls, freshly whitewashed to hide the cracks, shone under the orange light of late afternoon. The wooden windows with peeling blue paint were open to receive the breeze that almost never appeared. On the simple altar, only a lace cloth made by Zulmira, the oldest midwife in the place, and some colorful paper flowers, since real ones were a luxury the drought didn't allow. Father Joachim in his worn cassock smiled as he saw Connie and her son enter. She was like a pillar of that community, always the first to help the sick, to share the little she had, to organize work parties when someone needed to fix a roof or dig a new well. The barefoot saint, as the folk healers called her behind her back without her knowing. The service began with the old harmonium played by Old Man Joe, the only one who still knew how to coax music from that instrument older than the church itself. Voices joined in a song that spoke of green fields and abundant waters, a painful contrast to the reality that surrounded them. Connie sang loudly, as if she wanted her voice to pass through the adobe walls and reach the heavens themselves. That's when it happened. A sudden wind, one of those that appear out of nowhere in the dry country, invaded the sacred space with immense force. The windows slammed violently, candles were extinguished, and a crash followed by screams filled the air when part of the roof was ripped off as if it were made of paper. Flying tiles, dust in the sky, that same sky that refused to send rain, now exposed through the open wound in the church. "It's a sign," yelled Kitaria, the most superstitious of the devout women. "God is punishing us for our sins." Panic took over the environment. Some ran outside, fearing the rest of the roof would collapse. Others knelt praying fervently. Father Joachim, his weak voice barely audible over the commotion, tried to calm the faithful, but his advanced age and fragile health did not allow him to assert his presence. That's when Connie did something that surprised even herself. As if moved by a force she didn't recognize as her own, She walked slowly to the center of the church, passing through the agitated people. She stopped exactly under the opening in the roof, where a single ray of sun still illuminated the packed dirt floor, and knelt. Silence gradually settled, like waves receding after a storm. All eyes turned to that small figure with an undeniable presence kneeling in the center of a circle of light, her head bowed and hands joined in prayer. And then her voice emerged. Not a whisper nor a shout, a clear, clean voice which seemed to come not just from her throat, but from somewhere deep within her being. Lord, look upon us. We are not saints nor perfect, but we are your children. This land you gave us is dying in our fingers, like a flower without water. Our children look at the sky and do not know the sound of rain. Our elders leave before their time because even hope is no longer enough to keep them alive. Tears ran freely down her face, but her voice didn't falter. It was as if each word was a crystal clear drop of water in the midst of the desert of their lives. Send us, Lord, someone who can truly bless us, someone who will bring hope back to our land. We do not ask for riches or abundance. We ask only for enough so that we can continue believing that we have not been forgotten. When she finished her improvised prayer, an absolute silence hung over the church. Even the wind had ceased, as if all of nature had stopped to listen to that plea. Connie got up, embarrassed by her own boldness, and returned to her place beside Tim, who looked at her with a mixture of pride and awe. Mass continued, somehow more solemn despite the damaged roof. At the end, as people slowly left, many approached Connie to touch her arm or simply exchange a look. No one mentioned directly what had happened, but something had changed in the air. As if, in some inexplicable way, a small thread of hope had been woven back into the worn fabric of their lives. That night, while preparing a thin soup with the last vegetables from her dwindling garden, Connie heard knocking at the door. It was Jean, the only one in the village who had a working radio powered by old batteries. "Connie, you need to hear this," he said, breathless from running. "They're announcing it on the radio. The Pope Francis is coming to the country." "The Pope here?" she asked, incredulous. "Not exactly here, but they're saying he's going to visit rural communities affected by drought. He'll be touring the interior. Connie, don't you understand? It was your prayer. Heaven heard you, woman." Tim, who was listening from the small wooden table, ran to his mother's side. "Are you sure, Mr. Jean? It's not a radio prank, is it?" "Absolutely sure, son. They're talking about it on all channels. It seems he was convinced by a Brazilian seminarian who works at the Vatican, a young man who left this region many years ago." The news spread through the village with the speed of a spark on dry straw, from house to house by word of mouth, growing and transforming with each repetition. Soon came the information, no one knew exactly from where, that this seminarian was none other than Vincent, son of Mrs. Josephine from High Ridge, who had left for the seminary in the big city 15 years ago and had never been heard from since. The folk healers, elderly women who kept alive the traditions of blessings and prayers that blended Catholicism with ancient beliefs, were the main messengers, carrying their rosaries worn with use and wrapped in shawls despite the heat. They went from door to door announcing what they called Connie's miracle. "See? Her prayer crossed the ocean and touched the heart of the Holy Father," said Sebastiana, the most respected among them, fanning her face with a straw fan. "I always knew that girl had the gift, since she was little, when she blessed sick animals and they'd get well." The following days were filled with activity never before seen in Hope Creek. Without official confirmation, but moved by a hope they hadn't felt in a long time, the residents began cleaning the streets, fixing the facades of their humble homes, planning decorations with colorful paper bunting and saint figures carved in wood by the skilled hands of Totanho, the only craftsman in the region. Connie watched everything with a mixture of disbelief and concern, although her heart filled with joy seeing the community renewed by the simple glimpse of hope. Her practical eyes couldn't help but notice that her small patch of land was on the verge of complete ruin. While everyone was busy with preparations for a visit that wasn't even confirmed yet, the drought continued its relentless work. It was on an especially hot morning that the dusty jeep from the diocese appeared on the main road, Inside, a young priest with dark-rimmed glasses and a serious expression that contrasted with his youthful face. Father Michael, sent personally by the diocesan bishop, came with the mission of evaluating the village's conditions and confirming if it could be included in the papal itinerary. The entire community gathered in front of the church to receive the visitor. Father Joachim, fragile but determined to fulfill his role, introduced him to each important member of the community. When it was Connie's turn, the young priest narrowed his eyes in recognition. "So you are the famous Mrs. Connie. Your prayers traveled far, you know? There are rumors in the bishop's office that it was your prayer that inspired the Holy Father's visit." Connie lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "I didn't do anything special, Father. I just said what was stuck in all our hearts. That's exactly why I'm here," he smiled. "Pope Francis wants to visit communities where faith persists despite difficulties. And from what I see, you are the perfect example of that." Father Michael's words fell upon the community like the rain they had longed for. Officially, Hope Creek was on the papal itinerary, which would happen in 6 months. And furthermore, at the priest's own suggestion, Connie was chosen to lead the preparations. Her known good sense, combined with the episode of her prayer under ice, the broken roof that fateful Sunday, qualified her perfectly for the mission. The joy of the appointment, however, soon gave way to anxiety. How could she dedicate herself entirely to the preparations when her small plot, her only source of livelihood, was wasting away with each passing day? The few hours she managed to steal from sleep to work the land were no longer enough, and now she would have even less time. It was Tim who brought the solution. One afternoon, after hours poring over old notebooks that had belonged to his father, the boy appeared at the door with a determined gleam in his eyes. "Mom, I think I found a way to save our crop." Connie, who at that moment was sowing bunting, with scraps donated by neighbors, raised her tired eyes. "What way, son?" "A drip irrigation system. Look here in my father's drawings." He spread the time-yellowed notebooks on the table, where his late husband had scribbled projects he never had a chance to implement. Detailed drawings of a system that would use every drop of water, directing it directly to the roots of the plants. Tim explained, with the enthusiasm of youth, how he could build something similar using recycled materials. Plastic bottles, old hoses, punctured buckets. "My grandfather used to tell me that the old folks already did something similar, Mom. It's not new. We're just rediscovering what they already knew." The next day, with the help of some friends as young and hopeful as he, Tim began assembling his makeshift irrigation system. Connie watched from afar, divided between skepticism and admiration for her son's determination. Could that pile of discarded materials really make a difference? The answer came faster than she expected. In just 2 weeks, the small system was already showing results. Although still far from ideal, it managed to bring enough water to keep the hardiest plants alive. It wasn't abundance, but it was enough to give Connie the peace of mind needed to dedicate herself to the preparations for the papal visit. And it was good that it was so, because the first big challenge would soon come. Almost 4 months before the scheduled visit, the unthinkable happened. The sky, which for so long had refused to send rain, suddenly opened up in a furious and unexpected storm. For 3 days and 3 nights, torrential rains fell upon the region, as if all the rain held back in recent years decided to pour down at once. At first, there was celebration. Children ran through the muddy streets. Adults set out basins and buckets to catch the precious water. Women cried with joy looking at the sky. But soon the celebration gave way to fear. Streams that had been dry for years overflowed, turning into raging rivers that dragged everything in their path. Roads became impassable mudslides. Bridges were swept away by the current. In a few days, Hope Creek was practically isolated from the rest of the world. Father Michael's Jeep barely managed to leave before the last road was cut off by the waters. And with him went the hope of the papal visit. "How will they get here now?" lamented Quiteria at the door of Gumercindo's general store, where residents gathered to exchange news and lamentations. "It was a punishment, that's what it was. God gave us the water we asked for, but in a way we can't use." Rumors began to circulate. The visit would be canceled. The Pope would only go to communities with easier access. The itinerary would be completely changed. Connie faced similar doubts, but kept her questions to herself. When discouragement threatened to take over, she would take refuge in the partially rebuilt church and spend hours in silent vigil. She didn't say elaborate prayers like on that fateful day. She just sat in silence, like someone patiently waiting for a distant friend to finally answer a phone call. It was during one of these periods of vigil that she realized she wasn't alone. Sitting a few pews away, Alfred Mendonça, the farmer who owned the region's only artesian well, watched her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Alfred had never hidden his contempt for the small farmers who, according to him, refused to enter the 20th century. His well, drilled at great cost with machinery brought from the capital, provided enough water to keep his property green even during the worst droughts. Water he sold at increasingly high prices to desperate neighbors. With the unexpected rains and the possible papal visit, Alfred saw a golden opportunity. He began storing water in large reservoirs and raising his prices even further, anticipating that the community would need to show its best face to receive the illustrious visitor. "How long are you going to sit there, pretending your prayers will solve anything?" he asked Connie, breaking the sacred silence of the sanctuary. She looked at him without hostility, but also without submission. "As long as it takes, Mr. Alfred. Faith isn't in a hurry." "Faith won't rebuild the bridges or dry the roads," he retorted with a wry smile. "But money and influence can do that. And guess who has both in this end of the world?" He left without waiting for an answer, leaving a veiled threat in the air. The following Sunday, after Mass celebrated under a makeshift tarp while the church roof was still being rebuilt, Alfred made his move. He publicly announced that he would be making water from his well available at special prices for the special undertaking that was the papal visit. Prices that, as everyone soon discovered, were 3 times higher than usual. Normally peaceful, Connie felt an indignation she couldn't contain. Right there, in front of the whole community, she stepped forward. "With all due respect, Mr. Alfred, but you are taking advantage of our faith and our hope. This water doesn't belong to you. It comes from the same land that God gave to all of us." A murmur went through the crowd. No one had ever confronted the powerful farmer so openly. Some looked at the ground, fearing the confrontation. Others, especially the older women, made small signs of approval with their heads. Alfred, unused to being questioned, turned red with anger. "Are you inciting the people against me, woman? The well is on my property, dug with my money. The water is as much mine as the air you breathe is yours. The air belongs to everyone, as water should," she replied, feeling her legs tremble, but keeping her voice firm. "And if the Pope comes, it won't be to see a place where some prosper while many suffer. He will come to find a united community, which shares its sorrows and joys." That public confrontation divided the community. While many silently supported Connie, others feared retaliation from the farmer, who employed several residents on his land. Connie herself knew she had made a powerful enemy, but something inside her, the same force that had made her kneel under the broken roof on that fateful Sunday, told her she was on the right path. It was in this climate of tension that 3 months before the scheduled date for the papal visit, an unexpected group arrived in the village. They were young university students from the capital, part of an outreach project focused on sustainable rural development. They had left before the torrential rains and, with great difficulty, managed to reach the village, attracted by reports about the community that had caught the attention of the Pope himself. Among them was Anna Louise, a newly graduated agricultural engineer, daughter of migrants from the Northeast who moved to the big city in search of a better life. She had in her almond-shaped eyes the determination of someone who knows the value of the land, and in her simple gestures the practical wisdom of someone who understands that theory without application is like a seed without soil. On the very first day, while getting to know the village accompanied by Tim, who had offered to be her guide, Anna Louise was intrigued by the makeshift irrigation system the boy had installed on Connie's land. "Who taught you how to do this?" she asked, crouching down to examine the ingenious system of bottles and hoses. "My father left some drawings," Tim explained, proud. And my grandfather said the old folks used to do something similar. Anna Louise smiled, a smile that lit up her face in a way that made Tim blush. Your ancestors were very wise. Do you know what you've created here? A rudimentary version of an Israeli technique used in the Negev desert. There, they turned sand into fertile land with similar methods. In the following days, Anna Louise and Connie developed an immediate friendship. The young engineer explained to the farmer woman that her land, although ravaged by the drought, had ideal conditions to implement a modern dryland farming technique, inspired by methods used since biblical times. It's like watering a garden with dew, Anna Louise explained, drawing in the dirt with a stick. Instead of wasting water with conventional systems, we direct every drop exactly where it's needed. Connie listened attentively, but with reservations. Although she respected the young woman's knowledge, something in her heart rebelled against methods so different from those she had learned from her ancestors. I don't know, my dear. My grandfather always said the land needs time to rest just like we do. These new ideas seem to want to force nature. Anna Louise wasn't offended by the resistance. On the contrary, she perfectly understood the conflict between tradition and innovation. We can combine the best of both worlds, Mrs. Connie. Your ancestors' knowledge about the rhythm of the land, with some techniques that can help in these difficult times. The negotiation between the old and the new lasted for days. Meanwhile, the deadline for the papal visit was approaching, and the work to rebuild the roads and bridges was still crawling, limited by lack of resources and adequate machinery. It was on a full moon night, while rummaging through dusty boxes looking for decorations that could be repurposed for the village's adornment, that Connie found something that would change her perspective. A leather-bound notebook worn with use that had belonged to her late husband. Leafing through it by the light of a lantern, she discovered it was more than a simple diary. It was a meticulous record of observations about the land, the weather, the plants. And there, on time-yellowed pages, were drawings and notes describing a cultivation system that, to her surprise, was incredibly similar to what Anna Louise had proposed. The problem is not the land, but how we treat it, said one of the notes in her husband's neat handwriting. The ancient people of Israel knew this. Every drop in the right place at the right time. As my grandma from back home used to say, you don't quench a bird's thirst with a bucket of water. That discovery was like a sign. The next morning, Connie sought out Anna Louise and placed the notebook in her hands. We'll do it your way, or rather the way my husband already knew was right. In the following weeks, a small miracle began to happen on Connie's land. The irrigation system was expanded and improved with the help of the young university students. Seeds specially selected to resist drought were planted in a pattern Anna Louise called a beneficial consortium. And while on other properties the land remained cracked and barren, small green shoots began to emerge on Connie's land. The community watched, first with skepticism, then with astonishment, finally with hope. If it was possible to make the land flourish even after years of relentless drought, what else wouldn't be possible? 2 months before the scheduled date for the papal visit, when the project was already beginning to expand to other properties, and a climate of renewed hope hung over Hope Creek, the news everyone feared arrived. Due to the still precarious condition of the roads after the floods, the village had been removed from the list of communities the Pope would visit. The devastation was immense. Months of hard work, of hope cultivated day after day like the plants that now grew in their fields, everything seemed to have been in vain. Many again claimed it was divine punishment. Others blamed politics and the powerful who always forgot the small people. Connie felt the blow as deeply as everyone else. She retreated to her small house for a whole day, processing the disappointment. But when she reappeared, there was the same quiet determination in her eyes as always. She called a meeting in the church, now with the roof completely rebuilt, and made a proposal that, at first, sounded like madness to many. We will continue the preparations, she said simply, not for the Pope, but for ourselves, to celebrate what we have achieved together. The transformation has already begun, with or without the official blessing. The true miracle is not the visit itself, but what happened to our community while we were preparing for it. After the initial shock, the idea began to make sense. Indeed, in a few months they had achieved what years of lamentations hadn't. The community irrigation system was working. The first harvests, still modest, already offered a glimpse of a future where hunger would not be a constant threat. The internal divisions, symbolized by the reconciliation with Alfred, were beginning to heal. The Pope may not come to us, but that doesn't mean we can't bring the fruits of our labor to him, suggested Anna Louise. We can document everything that was done here, send photos, reports, show that the seed he unknowingly planted when he announced his visit is already bearing fruit. The idea was received with enthusiasm. In the following days, while preparations for the celebration of renewal continued, Tim and other young people, guided by Anna Louise and her team, began photographing and filming the project, preparing a detailed record that would be sent to the diocese and, who knows, might reach the Vatican. That's how, 2 weeks later, an unexpected helicopter appeared on the horizon of Hope Creek. It wasn't the Pope, of course, but a reconnaissance team sent by the Vatican, intrigued by satellite images showing an oasis in the desert, the flourishing of the agricultural project amidst the aridity that characterized the rest of the region. The visit was put back on the papal agenda, but with a fundamental change. The Pope would not just quickly pass through the location, as was the original plan, but wished to personally see the project that had transformed not only the physical landscape, but the social fabric of an entire community. The news was received with contained joy. The lesson of the previous disappointment had taught everyone to moderate their expectations. But in the heart of each resident, a flame of hope began to burn again with renewed intensity. Preparations gained new momentum. Tim, now practically Anna Louise's official assistant, worked tirelessly to ensure the irrigation system was working perfectly for the distinguished visit. Connie coordinated the final details of the village's decoration, making sure each house, no matter how humble, was looking its best. It was exactly 1 week before the big day that the unthinkable happened. Connie, exhausted from overwork and years of inadequate nutrition, suffered a health crisis that left her bedridden. The doctor, brought in urgently from the nearest town, diagnosed severe anemia and exhaustion, recommending absolute rest. "But I can't stay in bed now, doctor," she protested, trying to get up and being prevented by her own weakness. "There's so little time left and so much to organize. If you don't rest, you won't be alive to see the Pope," he replied seriously. "Your community will have to continue without you for a while." And so it was. Under the temporary leadership of Tim and Anna Louise, the preparations continued. Every few hours, someone would knock on Connie's door to give updates and ask for guidance. Although she appreciated the consideration, each visit was a painful reminder that she might not be present for the moment she had worked and prayed for so much. On the eve of the visit, as the sun set in shades of red and gold over the village, now adorned with colorful bunting and flowers brought especially from the city, Connie received an unexpected visit. Father Joachim, leaning on a cane but with eyes bright with renewed energy, entered her room accompanied by a young man wearing a cassock. "Connie, this is Vincent, the seminarian who works at the Vatican, the one who mentioned our community to the Holy Father." The young priest smiled humbly. "Actually, Mrs. Connie, I wasn't the one who convinced the Pope to come. I only mentioned this community's story during an audience, and something in the narrative deeply touched his heart. Pope Francis has a special fondness for the marginalized, for the forgotten." Vincent sat on the edge of the bed and took Connie's hand in his. "I came personally to tell you that the Holy Father specifically requested to meet you. When he learned of your condition, he expressed a desire to visit you right here, in your home." Connie felt tears well up in her eyes. "I can't allow that. The house is so simple, so humble to receive such an important person." Vincent smiled again, with a wisdom that seemed to go beyond his years. "Mrs. Connie, humility is exactly what attracts Pope Francis. He prefers to be among the simple who have big hearts than among the rich who have small hearts." On the morning of the big day, defying doctor's orders but unable to stay in bed while the whole community gathered for the historic moment, Connie was carried on a makeshift stretcher by her neighbors. Covered by a patchwork quilt made by the women of the community, she was taken to the center of the village, where a simple altar had been prepared. The sound of the helicopter was heard before it was seen, and then, appearing like an almost supernatural vision, the papal aircraft slowly descended, raising the red dust from the ground and creating a spectacle of light as the rays of the morning sun passed through the cloud of dirt, tinging everything with a warm, vibrant gold. When Pope Francis emerged from the helicopter, there was a moment of absolute silence, as if time had momentarily stopped. Dressed in white, with a gentle smile and eyes that seemed to absorb every detail around him, he walked slowly towards the crowd that awaited him. Ignoring protocol, the Pope went directly to the stretcher where Connie was waiting, surrounded by her neighbors. He knelt beside her in a gesture that made many hold their breath at his humility. "Connie," he said simply, in Portuguese with a strong Argentinian accent. "Your faith moved mountains." "No, Holy Father," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "Faith merely gave us the strength to move the stones one by one with our own hands." The meeting between the farmer woman of unwavering faith and Pope Francis, held in the shadow of the rebuilt church, became a powerful symbol of spiritual renewal. During the open-air Mass, the Pope spoke about the parable of the sower, specifically citing what he had witnessed in Hope Creek. "Here," he said, looking out at the sea of sun-scorched faces, "I found the true meaning of that parable. Even on rocky ground, genuine faith can flourish, especially when watered by communal love and hope that knows no impossible." At the end of the service, the Pope announced that the sustainability project started in the community would receive official church support to expand to other drought-affected regions. Anna Louise was named technical coordinator, and Tim her official assistant. As for Connie, she received from the Pope not only a special blessing, but also an invitation she could never have imagined, to share her experience at an international gathering of rural communities to be held at the Vatican the following year. "You have much to teach, not just about sustainable agriculture, but about cultivating hope in times of despair," the Pope told her as he said goodbye. That night, after the departure of the papal entourage, Connie sat on the doorstep of her adobe and thatch house, watching the starry sky that stretched like an infinite cloak over the dry country. Her body was still weak, but her soul had never been so strong. "See," Tim said, sitting beside her, "your prayer was answered." Connie smiled, putting her arm around her son's shoulders. "It was answered, but not in the way I imagined. I asked for someone who could bless us and bring hope. I thought it would be the Pope, but actually, it was ourselves. Each one of us, working together, was an instrument of that blessing." There, under the sky of Hope Creek, Connie understood that her desperate prayer had not only brought the Pope, but had triggered a complete transformation, turning her personal and communal desert into fertile ground for a new beginning. The seeds planted would continue to grow, not only in the soil enriched by new techniques, but in hearts renewed by a faith that finally had found expression in concrete acts of love for neighbor and care for creation. And on the horizon, beyond, the lands now dotted with green, a new harvest was announced. The harvest of hope whose seed, once planted, never ceases to flourish, even in the most arid soils of the human heart.